So we know that he could be charged very soon, or at least in the near future. We know that based off of past cases unrelated to President Trump, just in general with target letters, when an individual receives a target letter, it likely is an indication that they will be charged. Now, in terms of the charge, look, we're unclear on that. However, it could likely have to do with inciting violence, having, a hand in what happened that day. So definitely along the lines of incitement and, essentially being complicit really in the events of that day, but not really a surprise at this point. We knew that President Trump was likely to be a target of this investigation due to the fact that he played such a central role in that day, holding that rally, and then, of course, the subsequent, attack on the Capitol, which he stayed pretty silent for the most part, but definitely not a surprise.
Yeah. Is he likely to submit to this request to be questioned by a grand jury?
We'll have to see. We have seen him, in the past when he's been ordered to appear, before depositions and such. He will certainly, he's done that. However, he has pleaded the fifth before. He said he would plead the fifth before. So he could very much likely try to avoid that, or at least use his legal team to attempt to avoid that. We know that he's been railing against this investigations, like these other investigations he's facing, saying that he's the victim of the so-called political witch hunt. So, if it comes down to it, if he has to do it, he has to do it. But I would imagine that he'd try to find some sort of a legal loophole if possible.
Yeah. His lawyers are working overtime, the ones that he can actually find to work with him, because that's also a struggle, because he's been trying to delay the case over the removal of sensitive documents from the White House. What chance does he have in being able to put this case off until after the 2024 election?
Look, it's possible, because we do know that there are concerns about this case happening during an election year, and political impacts, the outside impacts that it could have on the case. But at the same time, as close as we are to 2024, we're already in July right now, less than 6 months away, from the start of the year. I think there is definitely a need for it to get going, and prosecutors to want to wrap this up or get started as soon as possible. I would imagine they don't want to prolong it. So I don't think, it stands the biggest chance at this point, because that would be, if it was till 2025, that would be a year and a half from now. And I don't think they want to necessarily wait for that. And then, of course, there's the additional complication of, if he were to be elected president again, what does that look like? We know that, that this wouldn't stop him from being elected president, but there is that question.
Yeah, which is quite remarkable, and remarkable too that so many of his Republican colleagues back his claims that it is politically motivated, don't seem to be concerned by the legal challenges that he is facing.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I think a lot of these Republican lawmakers and these, Republican figures in Washington and, leaders across the country, they're under pressure from their own constituents. We know that there is a broad belief among conservatives and the hardcore Republican primary base in this country that the Department of Justice and, law enforcement agencies in this country at the federal level is biased against Republicans versus Democrats. A lot of Republicans bring up the Hunter Biden investigation, for example, and say if Hunter Biden were a Republican or the son of a Republican, he would be treated very differently. What's very telling, though, is listening to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Trump's rival in the Republican primary. He's very, very careful not to attack Trump on this front. In fact, yesterday in an interview with CNN, he said, quote unquote, he hopes Trump does not get charged. That's a remarkable thing to hear a political rival say about their opponent going into an election.
Well, he knows it could anger Trump's base, which he's trying to win over to some degree, but it does seem as if his campaign has run into a little bit of a stumbling block, running out of steam, and some of his top backers seeming to back away.
Yes. So, the lead up to his May announcement that he was jumping into the election, there was a lot of anticipation around Ron DeSantis. Last November when he won re-election, we saw that Florida was really the exception to this, the blue wave we saw across the country. We saw Florida became very, very conservative. A lot of Republicans won. Ron DeSantis was seen as a future face of the Republican Party, and a likely potential presidential candidate who could be successful. However, that hasn't happened. He's still number 2 in the polls, but he's trailing Trump by double digits. He continues to trail him. He's not really making any headway there. His campaign laid off some employees last week. We've seen that he's raised a lot of money, but he's also burning through a lot of that cash. And when we look at fundraising, political fundraising here in the United States, the amount of money raised is important, but that burn rate, I would say, is more important and tells you more about the state of the campaign, and he's going through that cash. So, the interview he did with CNN yesterday was remarkable because it signaled a shift in his own campaign strategy, because before, Ron DeSantis was only going on conservative news outlets or right-leaning news outlets and rarely even talking to straight news anchors on those news outlets, much preferring to talk to the conservative, pundits and personalities on those outlets. So I think it signals that he's trying to change his strategy and maybe appeal to a broader group of Republicans.
Meanwhile, Julia, on the Democrat side, there are a few troubles too with a Kennedy, of course, from the famous dynasty running for a Democratic nomination. He's run foul of some rather extreme theories that he likes to purport.
He is. And we know that, he has for quite some time used, talked about vaccine skepticism, and he is anti-vaccine, and he's talked about this, and it's been very controversial. And in fact, Robert F. Kennedy's entire family has spoken out against him on this front, and he's recently made some claims that the coronavirus was manufactured, and that's gotten some pushback from not only Democrats, but members of the Kennedy family. Now, Robert F. Kennedy is only running, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I should say, is only running, he's quite a bit behind President Biden in the polls. He does not pose a threat to him. However, he is polling in the double digits. And that does, I think, paint a picture of an enthusiasm gap for President Biden, that some Democrats may be wanting something different. That could impact President Biden in a state like New Hampshire, for example, a state that President Biden did not win in the 2020 Democratic primary. So, I don't think he stands a chance of winning RFK at this point. However, he does stand a chance at showing that there is an enthusiasm gap.
Fascinating time in politics, Julia. Good to talk. Thanks.
Thank you.